In 1991, a 13-year-old Girl Scout named Katie Murrow vanished during a summer camp trip deep in the pine-covered hills of northern Oregon. It happened on a chilly August evening during a weekend retreat organized by Camp Pineheart, a rustic, scouting campground surrounded by hundreds of acres of dense forest. One moment, she was roasting marshmallows by the fire with the other girls. The next, she was gone. No scream, no footprints, no trace, only her empty sleeping bag. The local search was immediate and intense. Helicopters, tracking dogs, volunteers from Merrow Creek and nearby towns. The entire forest was combed for days, but after a week of nothing but dead ends and wild speculation, the story faded. News crews left. Search parties gave up. Even the sheriff at the time, a man named Carl Rudd, admitted to Katie's mother, Elaine, that she should start preparing for the worst, but Elaine never did. She refused to hold a funeral. She kept Katie's room exactly as it was. Every birthday, she baked the same vanilla cake Katie loved, setting a plate at the table, whispering, "Just in case." For 15 years, there was nothing. No calls, no letters, no sightings, just a silence so heavy it began to rot the soul. Until now. In 2006, on a foggy morning in late October, a park ranger patrolling the northern quadrant of the forest, a restricted, long-forgotten section near the old fire roads, discovered an abandoned ranger cabin almost hidden by moss and years of overgrowth. The structure wasn't on any of the current maps, just a sagging roof, crooked chimney, and shattered windows. But when Ranger Theo Raines stepped inside to document the site, his flashlight caught something on the wooden beam above the hearth. Letters carved, by hand, shaky, jagged, but still legible. Katie, Aug 13, 1991. Still here. It stopped him cold. Raines radioed the county sheriff. A day later, Katie's mother was on site. And now, Elaine Murrow stands at the edge of the clearing, her boots sinking slightly into the soft, wet earth, heart pounding like a drum inside her chest. The air smells of rain, cedar, and something older, the musk of old cabins and forgotten memories. She hasn't stepped foot in these woods since the day her daughter vanished. Now, she's here, staring at a piece of wood that might be the last message her child ever wrote. Theo waits by the cabin door. His hands are tucked into his ranger coat, face pale. He glances at her gently. "Take your time." Elaine doesn't answer. She just moves forward, drawn like a magnet to the dark shape in the trees. The door creaks open. Inside, the light is dim. The air is thick, damp and stale, tinged with mildew and the faint scent of rodent nests. Dust dances in the beams of Theo's flashlight. The floor is littered with pine needles and broken glass. A rusted cot leans against the wall. A stack of firewood, long since rotted, sits untouched in the corner. But all Elaine sees is the beam. The wood is old and cracked, but the carving is clear. She steps closer, craning her neck, squinting in the gloom. Katie, Aug 13, 1991. Still here. 3 short lines. A scream etched in silence. Elaine reaches out, her fingertips brushing the carved letters. They're shallow, made with something dull. A rock, maybe, or a broken tool. Her throat tightens, her knees tremble. "She was alive," she whispers. Theo nods slowly. "This cabin's not on our active maps. It was probably built back in the 60s. Fell off the grid. Nobody's been up here in years." Elaine's voice is barely audible. "Why didn't they search this far?" Theo looks at her with quiet sorrow. The initial search focused on the lake trail and the southern ridge. This area, it's 4 miles northeast. No marked paths. The terrain's too steep. Back then they didn't even think this place existed. Elaine closes her eyes. 15 years. 15 years thinking her daughter had died that night. But Katie didn't vanish into thin air. She ran or hid, or maybe she was taken and escaped, and for at least 2 days. She survived. She wrote this message. She waited. Maybe she hoped someone would find it. Maybe she thought her mother would come. Elaine backs away slowly, her breath ragged. She feels like the trees are watching, like the whole forest has been holding its breath, waiting for her to return. Theo speaks again. "There's more. I didn't want to overwhelm you." She turns sharply. "What do you mean, more?" He points to the far wall. "There's a piece of fabric, stuffed behind one of the wall boards. We didn't move it. Thought you should see it first." Elaine steps forward, her heartbeat drumming. Theo guides the flashlight. There, between 2 warped boards, something dark and faded is wedged into the gap. He pries it loose carefully, holding it up. It's a piece of cloth, navy blue, frayed at the edges. Elaine gasps. It's a piece of Katie's Camp Pineheart uniform. She knows it. Instantly. The color, the fabric, the small silver button still attached. She touches it like it's a sacred relic. Her eyes fill with tears. "She was here," she murmurs. "She lived long enough to take shelter, to try to leave a sign. She didn't give up." Theo nods. "We'll run forensics, but I'm filing for a reclassification, from presumed dead to missing person. Status reopened." Elaine doesn't speak. She doesn't need to, because in her bones, she already knows the forest never gave Katie back, but Katie tried. She left a message, and someone, or something, made sure no one ever found it, until now. Elaine sat alone, in the sheriff's office, hands folded tightly in her lap, as a low hum from the overhead lights filled the silence. The piece of Katie's uniform, now sealed in an evidence bag, sat on the desk in front of her beside the sheriff's case file from 1991. The room smelled faintly of coffee and dust. A clock ticked steadily above the filing cabinet, marking each second like a slow heartbeat. Across from her, Sheriff Dana Colburn flipped through the old file with visible discomfort. She was in her late 40s, too young to have worked the case back then, but old enough to remember the way the town had collapsed when the news first broke. Elaine watched the sheriff with quiet intensity. "This changes everything," Colburn finally said, setting the file down. "That cabin was never logged as part of the original search grid. Not even once. Which means your daughter could have been up there the whole time, waiting. Maybe hiding." Elaine's voice was steady, but hollow. "She didn't just vanish. Someone missed her. Someone didn't look far enough." Colburn nodded slowly. "We're reopening the case. I've already submitted the paperwork. The Oregon State Forensics Lab will handle the uniform fragment and the carving. They'll check for DNA, fingerprints, anything, but it's been 15 years, Elaine." Finished for her, her voice bitter. "Yeah." Elaine looked down at her hands. They were thinner now, paler. The hands of a woman who had waited too long for answers. "When she disappeared, I told everyone she wasn't dead. I knew it. I felt it. Like she was still tethered to me, somehow. But they all looked at me like I was broken. Or desperate." Colburn closed the folder. "You weren't wrong, Elaine, and I think she was trying to reach you." A heavy silence settled over them. Elaine finally stood. "I want to go back there." "To the cabin?" Elaine nodded. "I need to feel the place again. Not just once. Not with deputies and tape and cameras. Alone. Like she was." The sheriff hesitated, then relented. "If Ranger Rains is willing to guide you and you're careful, I won't stop you. But promise me something." Elaine looked at her. "Promise me you won't go chasing ghosts. If this goes cold again, I don't want to be the one to pull you out of those woods in pieces." Elaine didn't promise anything. She just walked out the door. 2 days later, the fog was thicker. The trees loomed taller. Elaine followed Ranger Theo Rains up the same narrow trail, but this time there were no deputies, no search teams, Only the two of them, carrying flashlights and a backpack of supplies. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Even the birds seemed to hold their songs. As they reached the cabin clearing, Theo slowed. "I'll stay outside," he said gently. "Take all the time you need." Elaine nodded and stepped through the sagging doorway. Inside, the air was colder. Now. Damp. Like the walls were still holding their breath from what had once happened here. She walked to the beam again, traced Katie's name with her fingers. Still here. She sat down on the floor, cross-legged like a child, closed her eyes, and listened. For a long time there was only silence. But then, something shifted. A memory. She saw Katie, bright-eyed, shy smile, her hair always tucked behind her ears. The girl who used to hum when she was nervous, who carried a sketchbook everywhere, who once told her mother, "The forest listens, you know. Trees keep secrets." Elaine opened her eyes, then stood. There was a narrow space between the back wall and the old firewood stack. Something about it felt off. She moved the rotted logs aside one by one, and behind them, a plank, slightly lifted, a crawl space. Elaine's breath caught. With effort, she pulled it open. The space beneath the cabin was small, maybe 4 feet deep, enough for a child to hide. It smelled of dirt and old things. Inside, half buried in dry leaves and pine straw, was something glinting, faintly in the light. Elaine reached in, heart pounding. It was a tin lunchbox, faded pink, the kind they sold in the camp gift shop. Her hand shook as she opened it. Inside was a pencil stub, a folded map, a tiny mirror, a scrap of cloth, and something else. A page torn from a notebook. Elaine unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was faint, uneven, but it was Katie's. "He comes at night. I hear him, but he doesn't see me. I keep the mirror to watch. I think he's looking for me, but I stay quiet. I stay low. I'll wait for Mom." Elaine gasped aloud. Her knees buckled. Theo burst through the door. "Elaine!" She held up the note, eyes wide with disbelief. "She was hiding," she whispered. "She stayed hidden. Someone was out there, and she waited for me." Theo stared. At the note, then at the crawl space. "This isn't just a lost child case," he said quietly. "Someone was hunting her." Elaine nodded, and in that moment, the forest didn't feel still anymore. It felt alive, watching, waiting, and filled with secrets no one had dared to find. The note was now sealed in another evidence bag, but its words echoed through Elaine's mind like the sound of a child calling from somewhere far away. She sat in the back of the sheriff's SUV as it rumbled down the dirt path back toward Merrow Creek, her eyes fixed on the tree line blurring past. It wasn't just a message from the past. It was a warning. Katie had been hiding because someone had been searching for her. Sheriff Colburn sat in the passenger seat, flipping through photos of the lunchbox and the contents they'd recovered. The mirror had fingerprints, partial, old. The map was from the 1989 Camp Pineheart issue, creased and smudged, but intact. The cloth? Possibly from another part of the same camp uniform. And the note. It had one clear fingerprint. A child's. "We'll get DNA confirmation," Colburn said without turning around. "But it's her. I can feel it." Elaine didn't answer. Her voice had dried up somewhere between the cabin and the first mile of descent. She felt cracked open. Not by grief, she had lived with that weight for years, but by something colder. Something new, fear, because if someone had been out there in 1991, hunting a lost child in the woods, who were they? And why? As the SUV reached the outskirts of town, Elaine finally spoke. "I want to talk to the camp staff, everyone who was there in 91. Colburn turned in her seat. "Most of them have moved, retired. Some are gone." "Then, start with the director." Colburn nodded slowly. "Gwen Traylor. She still lives near here, I believe, just outside Timberline. She was in charge of Camp Pinehart from the late 80s until it shut down in '95. Elaine looked out the window again. Find her. They met Gwen Traylor 2 days later. Her house sat on the edge of a wooded ravine, a modest ranch-style home with peeling blue paint and a wind chime that clinked gently in the breeze. She answered the door wearing an oversized cardigan and holding a mug of chamomile tea, her gray hair pulled into a loose bun. Her eyes narrowed the moment she saw the sheriff. "Something wrong?" she asked, voice tight. "We're here about—" "Katie Murrow," Colburn said. Gwen froze. Elaine stepped forward. "I'm her mother." Gwen stared at her for a long time. Then, without a word, she stepped aside and let them in. The living room smelled of old fabric and something sweet, maybe vanilla or faded potpourri. Gwen motioned to the couch and sat in a recliner opposite, cradling her tea like a shield. "We found something," Colburn began gently. "Near the old fire roads. A cabin. Some items linked to Katie." Gwen's hand tightened on her cup. Elaine leaned in. "She didn't die, Gwen. Not right away. She was alive for at least 2 more days. Maybe longer." The camp director looked down. "I always feared that," she whispered. "That we didn't look far enough. That she might have—" "Someone was out there," Elaine interrupted. "She wrote about it. He comes at night." "Who would she have meant?" Gwen shook her head slowly. "I don't know." Colburn studied her. "Who had access to the outer areas of the camp? Past the lake trail?" Gwen didn't answer at first. Then, after a long silence, "Maintenance staff, older counselors, a few off-site volunteers. There was a man, a groundskeeper, quiet, loner, worked odd hours, always carried a walkie, stayed in the north cabins during the season." Elaine's pulse quickened. "Name?" "Glenn Durst," Gwen said. "But we fired him the summer before Katie disappeared." "Why?" Gwen looked uncomfortable. "He made some of the girls uneasy. Nothing ever confirmed. Just a feeling." Elaine stood up. "I want his address." Colburn stood too. "We'll find him." Gwen watched them with tired eyes. "I thought she was just another missing child," she murmured. "But maybe we failed her worse than I realized." Elaine didn't answer. She just walked out into the cold afternoon light. That night, Elaine couldn't sleep. She lay on her couch, the TV flickering low in the corner, casting faint shadows across the walls. The house was silent. Too silent. Every creak, every rustle outside made her eyes snap open. At 2:14 a.m., her phone buzzed. It was Theo. She answered immediately. "I'm sorry to call so late," he said, his voice low. "I couldn't stop thinking about the crawl space, so I went back. Just me. Just to look again." Elaine sat up. "Did you find something?" A pause. "Yes." Her breath caught. "There's something carved into the underside of the floorboards, right above where the lunchbox was hidden. It's faint, but it's there. Words. A name." "Whose name?" Another pause. Then, "Durst." Elaine didn't speak. She couldn't. "The same handwriting," Theo continued. "Same pressure. Same hand that carved Katie's message." "Are you sure?" "I'd bet my badge on it." Elaine rose from the couch slowly, her knees weak, her voice trembling. She knew who he was. The morning fog had not yet lifted when Elaine and Sheriff Colburn pulled into the gravel driveway of a faded one-story house on the outskirts of Merrow Creek. The grass was overgrown, and the paint peeled in long, curling strips from the siding. An old pickup truck sat rusted beneath a leaning carport, its windshield cracked like a spiderweb. A weathered mailbox read G. Durst in crooked black letters. Elaine stared at the house in silence. "He's in there?" she asked. Colburn nodded, scanning the front windows. "Still lives alone. Never married. No children. Worked odd jobs for years after Camp Pinehart shut down. No criminal record." but more than a few complaints. What kind? The sheriff hesitated. Trespassing, loitering near schools, never enough to press charges, always just far enough outside the law. Elaine's stomach turned. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because back then, everything was rumors, Colburn replied. And because the town was already drowning in panic. They stepped out of the vehicle together, the gravel crunching beneath their boots. Elaine kept her hands clenched tightly. At her sides, every nerve in her body pulling taut. Colburn knocked twice. A long pause. Then the door creaked open. Glenn Durst stood in the shadowed doorway, wearing a flannel shirt and work pants stained with oil. His face was weathered, leathery, and streaked with age. His eyes, pale and watery, narrowed at the sight of them. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Mr. Durst," Colburn said evenly, flashing her badge. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about Camp Pineheart." He snorted. "That was years ago." Elaine stepped forward. "Do you remember Katie Murrow?" Durst's gaze flicked to her, and for the briefest second, something shifted behind his eyes. Then it was gone. "I remember the name," he said flatly. "The girl who went missing." "She didn't go missing," Elaine said, her voice cold. "She was hiding. In a cabin near the North Trail. She left notes." Durst's jaw tightened. "Notes?" he said. "What kind of notes?" Elaine leaned in. "Your name was carved into the floor." Now, he stepped back. Colburn placed a firm hand on the door. "Mr. Durst, we'd like to ask you to come with us to the station. Voluntarily, to clarify a few things." Durst's face twitched. "I didn't touch that girl," he said suddenly. "I never laid a hand on her." Elaine's blood froze. "We never said you did," Colburn replied. But it was too late. The words had spilled. Durst blinked rapidly, as if trying to pull them back. Then he opened the door wider. "I got nothing to hide," he said. "You want to talk? Let's talk." At the station, Durst sat under the harsh fluorescent lights of Interview Room A. Elaine watched from behind the glass with Colburn and Theo, who had joined them straight from the ranger station. His face was drawn and pale. "He's nervous," Theo said, arms crossed. "Can feel it." Colburn nodded. "Because something's in there. Guilt, maybe. Or fear." Inside the room, another deputy conducted the interview. Durst fidgeted with a paper cup of water, refusing eye contact. "I remember Katie," he said. "Quiet girl, shy, always carried that damn sketchbook. Did you ever interact with her directly?" Durst shook his head. "No, I was just grounds, cut trails, fixed fences, filled the generator. The kids weren't my job." "What about the night she disappeared?" He shrugged. "Didn't even know she was gone till the next morning. By then, everyone was panicking. Camp was in chaos." The deputy slid a photograph across the table. The image of Katie's carved message. Durst's eyes lingered on it too long. "We found this at an abandoned cabin," the deputy said. "You know the place?" Durst stared, then shook his head. "No." Another photo followed. The lunchbox, the note, the name carved beneath the floorboards. This time, Durst's face changed. Not denial, not confusion, recognition. "You think I did something to her?" he snapped. "That I chased her into the woods? I didn't even know that cabin existed." Elaine leaned closer to the glass. The deputy kept his voice calm. "We just want the truth, Mr. Durst. About what you saw, what you knew. You were there. You walked those trails. Every night." Durst's hands trembled slightly. Then he exhaled. "There was someone else," he said. Silence. "In the woods. Not part of the staff. I saw him once, at night. Thought maybe he was a hunter, or someone from the town." "When was this?" "The week Katie disappeared," Durst whispered. "I was walking near the ridge, heard rustling, figured it was raccoons. But when I looked, I saw a man. Tall, wearing dark clothes, just standing there." The deputy frowned. Why didn't you report it? Durst looked away. Because I didn't want to get involved. Elaine's fists clenched. Theo muttered. Coward, Durst continued, voice low. He didn't move, just stared. And then he was gone, slipped between the trees, like he knew the place better than anyone. The deputy leaned in. Can you describe him? Durst shook his head. Only saw his face for a second. White, clean-shaven, maybe in his 40s. But he looked wrong, cold, like he wasn't supposed to be there. Theo turned to Colburn. We need composite sketches, and to run local property records. Elaine nodded. If someone was living in those woods, they might still be there. The sheriff exhaled slowly. This case just turned again. Because Katie wasn't just hiding. She was hiding from someone, and after 15 years, that shadow might still be out there, waiting, watching, remembering. The following morning, the air in Marrow Creek was heavy, almost metallic. A low mist clung to the rooftops, weaving through alleyways and open fields like something alive. Elaine sat at her kitchen table, unmoving, as sunlight filtered through yellowed blinds and painted long shadows across the linoleum floor. She hadn't slept. Durst's words echoed in her mind. About the man in the woods, watching, silent, cold. A stranger who knew the trails. Who didn't belong. Who might still be there. The thought curled around her ribs like ice. She reached for Katie's old sketchbook. The one she'd found in the attic last year during a cleaning spree. It was filled with pencil drawings of birds, trees, faces. Some were crude, others heartbreakingly detailed. She flipped to the last few pages. One sketch stopped her cold. It was a man, tall, with dark eyes and a straight mouth. His shoulders were hunched, hands in pockets. He stood beneath trees, alone, watching. Elaine stared. She hadn't noticed this before. Was this the man Durst had seen? She picked up the sketchbook, stood, and walked out the door without a coat. Sheriff Colburn met her at the station. They placed the sketch on the evidence table under the flickering fluorescent light. Theo, who had arrived minutes earlier, leaned in to study it. She drew this? He asked. Elaine nodded. It was in the back, not labeled, but it looks deliberate. She saw something, someone. Colburn pursed her lips. Could be the same figure Durst saw, or maybe a dream. But we should run it through facial recognition anyway. Just in case. Elaine wasn't convinced it was fantasy. Too detailed. Too still. The kind of image burned into memory, not imagination. Theo turned to the sheriff. I've been thinking. What if the man Durst saw wasn't from town at all? What if he was living out there? You mean like a squatter? Colburn asked. Or something else, Theo said. Survivalist. Ex-military. Off-grid hermit. We've had a few over the years. There are miles of old mining tunnels and hunting cabins in that forest. Places no one's mapped in decades. Elaine felt her throat tighten. You think someone took her? Theo didn't answer directly. I think someone knew she was there. Colburn stood. Let's expand the search zone. Drones, night patrols, thermal imaging. If someone's still living out there, they'll leave heat signatures. Trash. Trails. Something. Elaine gripped the table. I'm coming with you. Colburn shook her head. Elaine, I know those woods. I know her. I'll see things you'll miss. Theo met Colburn's eyes. She should come. Within limits. She won't slow us down. Reluctantly, Colburn nodded. We go tomorrow. At dawn, they returned to the woods. A different trail this time, one that veered northeast from the cabin toward an area known locally as Dead Creek Hollow. The name came from a dried-out riverbed that twisted through steep ravines and undergrowth. Locals rarely hiked there. Too many cougars. Too few reasons. Elaine moved with quiet purpose, stepping carefully behind Theo, her eyes scanning every branch, every indentation in the ground. About a mile in, the trees grew denser. The air turned cooler. Theo stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. Listen. They froze. No wind, no birds. Only a faint metallic clink, irregular, distant, almost like a chain being pulled. He turned to the sheriff. That's man-made. They followed the sound, pushing through thick brush. The forest gave way to a shallow clearing, and there, half buried beneath moss and vines, stood what looked like a trap door. Metal, old, bolted shut. Theo stepped forward. This isn't on any survey map. Elaine's heart pounded. What is it? Colburn crouched, brushing away leaves. Looks like an old storm shelter. Maybe Cold War era. Theo tried the handle. Locked. He stepped back and looked at Elaine. If she was hiding, she might have found this, Elaine whispered. Colburn radioed her team. Bring cutting tools and backup. While they waited, Theo examined the area. Look at this, he said, pointing to a faint trail leading into the trees. Recent footprints, not animal. Elaine followed his gaze. Boot prints. Deep, narrow. Maybe 2 days old. Someone had been here. She turned back to the trap door, then knelt beside it. In the rusted metal, scratched faintly into the surface, were letters. She squinted. K.M. Katie Murrow, carved with something sharp. A knife, maybe. Theo's voice dropped. She made it here. Elaine stood slowly, the forest spinning around her. But did she leave? Just then, Colburn's radio crackled. Sheriff, we've got movement. Drone picked up a heat signature. About 300 yards north of your location. Stationary. Could be a camp. Elaine turned toward the trees. So did Theo. Colburn looked at them both. Let's move. They found the site 15 minutes later. A small encampment, hidden beneath. A rocky outcrop, tarped roof, piles of split wood, an extinguished fire pit, and near the edge, a rucksack, old, canvas, military style. Theo opened it carefully. Inside, canned food, matches, a worn field journal, and something else. A child's hair ribbon, blue, faded. Elaine reached for it, held it gently. It was Katie's. I bought this for her, she said, voice shaking. At the scout store. Summer of '91. Colburn looked around the clearing. This was lived in. Someone stayed here. Maybe more than one. Elaine closed her hand around the ribbon. Katie hadn't been alone. She had found shelter. But had she ever escaped, or had someone else made sure she didn't? The journal found in the rucksack was damp but salvageable. Theo wrapped it in plastic and handed it off to the sheriff's forensic techs, who promised to dry and scan each page carefully. Elaine, however, couldn't wait. As soon as they were back in the sheriff's office, she asked to see the field journal again, to hold it, to feel the pages her daughter, or someone close to her, might have once touched. It was small, bound in green canvas, and smelled faintly of smoke and pine. The cover bore no name. The first dozen pages were soaked beyond legibility, but deeper in, ink began to re-emerge. Uneven. Block letters. At first nothing more than dates and short observations. June 3rd. Trap broke. Snares empty again. June 7th. Footsteps near creek. Watched, not followed. June 10th. Saw her again. Elaine's breath caught. She looked up at Sheriff Colburn, who stood at the door with arms crossed, watching her carefully. Who wrote this? Elaine asked. We're not sure yet, Colburn replied. Could be someone watching Katie. Could be someone she found. Theo stepped forward. That line, saw her again. It means he saw her before. She wasn't alone. Elaine turned. The page. June 12th. She left mark near the trapdoor. Initials. KM brought her bread. Another pause. Then, she sleeps in the hole. Elaine's knees gave out. She sat heavily in the nearest chair. She was down there. she whispered. In that storm shelter. That's why it was bolted from outside. Someone locked her in. Colburn's jaw tightened. Or locked others out. Theo frowned. He brought her bread. That means he knew where she was and kept coming back. Elaine flipped ahead. June 15th. She won't speak, just draws. Birds, trees, cabins. June 19th. Storm coming. Left extra. Blanket. Think she's getting sick. And then, the final legible page, June 23rd. Heard shouting near ridge. Men with dogs. Stayed hidden. She curled up in corner. Didn't cry. Elaine touched the page like a wound. They were close, she murmured. The search team. She heard them. But she was too afraid to come out. The sheriff leaned closer. We need to find the author. This journal changes everything. Elaine's voice hardened. He kept her alive. He fed her. He hid her. But he never brought her home. Theo looked at the sheriff. What if it wasn't malice? What if he was afraid she'd be taken again? Or worse, what if she didn't want to go back? Elaine flinched. No, she said firmly. She was just a child. Later that afternoon, a deputy knocked on the sheriff's office door with an update. Ran the journal through handwriting recognition. We got a hit. Not local, but flagged in a federal system. Colburn straightened. Who? The deputy hesitated. His name's Russell Kane. Former U.S. Army. Discharged in '85. Lived off-grid since '89. He was arrested once, 1990, for illegal trapping in Deschutes County. Charges dropped. Elaine's brow furrowed. He was in Oregon, around the time Katie vanished. Theo asked, Where is he now? Unknown, the deputy replied. But he's tied to a property up north. 40 acres, deep forest, near the Salmon River. Registered to his brother. Kane's name isn't on it, but we have drone footage. Someone's living there. Colburn looked at Elaine. You should stay here. I'm not, Elaine replied. She might be there, or something of hers might be. The sheriff sighed. We leave at dawn. The next morning, a convoy of unmarked vehicles pushed north through fog-choked roads, the trees growing denser with every mile. Elaine rode in the back with Theo, her fingers clutched tightly around the blue hair ribbon they'd found. She hadn't let it go since the day before, not even in sleep. The forest near the Salmon River felt different, older, wilder, more secretive. They parked half a mile from the edge of Kane's supposed homestead and approached on foot. Theo moved ahead with a scoped rifle slung over his shoulder, signaling silently with 2 fingers whenever he spotted movement. The house came into view slowly, a timber cabin nestled between 3 pine-covered ridges. Smoke rose faintly from the chimney. A chicken coop stood to one side, a hand-dug well to the other. There were no fences, no signs of welcome, only silence. Colburn held up a hand. Then she stepped forward. Mr. Kane, she called. This is Sheriff Dana Colburn with Murrow County. We're not here to arrest you. We just need to talk. No response. Then, the front door creaked. An old man stepped out, his face lined with years of solitude. Gray beard, tattered wool shirt, eyes that had seen too much and said too little. Elaine froze. She recognized him. Not from life. From Katie's sketchbook. This was the man. Russell Kane raised both hands slowly. You found me, he said, voice like gravel. Took you long enough? Colburn approached, cautious. We're not here to hurt you. We just want answers. About a girl. Katie Murrow. Kane nodded slowly. I remember her. Elaine stepped forward, her voice trembling. Did she survive? Kane looked at her, and in his eyes was something unexpected. Sadness. Yes, he said. She survived longer than anyone knew. Elaine's heart stopped. Then Kane added softly, but not forever. Elaine's breath caught in her throat. The words hung in the cold forest air like smoke. But not forever. Kane stood motionless, hands still raised, his eyes locked on hers. There was no defiance in his voice, no justification, only something deeper. Regret? Grief? Sheriff Colburn stepped between them. "Mr. Kane, we need to speak with you inside. About everything you remember." Kane nodded slowly, then turned and stepped back into the cabin. The others followed in tense silence. Inside, the cabin was austere, but lived in. A wood stove glowed faintly in the corner. Shelves lined with old jars and survival manuals. A single chair, a cot, a desk covered in yellowed papers. The walls were adorned with maps, most hand-drawn, detailing the surrounding forest with obsessive precision. Kane gestured to the chair for Elaine. "You should sit. This won't be easy." Elaine ignored the offer. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "When did you find her?" Kane didn't sit either. He stayed near the window, arms crossed. "It was a week after the story hit the radio. I was trapping near Dead Creek Hollow. I saw movement near the old storm shelter. Figured it was raccoons. But it was her." He paused. "She was barefoot, dirty, half-starved, hiding behind the rocks like a feral thing." Elaine's voice was hoarse. "Did she speak?" Kane nodded. "Eventually. It took days. I brought food, sat far away, told her stories, about my dog, about the stars. She watched me, like a deer. And then I brought her a blanket, showed her how to clean water, taught her how to build fires." He swallowed. "She started drawing in the dirt. I gave her my old journal." Elaine's knees buckled slightly. She gripped the back of the chair to steady herself. "She trusted you?" Colburn asked. "I think so, but she was always afraid, always listening." He looked up. "She said someone was still out there." Elaine blinked. "What do you mean?" She never said a name. Just that he comes at night, that she'd hear footsteps, breathing. Once, she pointed toward the ridge and said, "He lives behind the trees." Kane shook his head. "I thought it was trauma, nightmares. But some nights, I heard it too." Theo stepped closer. "You never reported it?" Kane's eyes darkened. "And risked the state hauling her off to some hospital? Turning her into a case file?" Elaine's voice broke. "So you kept her?" Kane turned to her. "I protected her." Silence fell. Elaine finally sat. Her hands trembled in her lap. "How long was she with you?" Kane exhaled. 3 months. Theo flinched. "That's impossible." Search teams were out there for weeks. They didn't see a thing. "They weren't looking in the right places," Kane muttered. "And she stayed low. She had instincts. She'd freeze for hours at the sound of a twig snapping. Like she knew someone else was hunting." Elaine stared at him. "What happened to her?" Kane's mouth tightened. "She got sick. October. Weather turned. I tried to keep her warm. Tried everything I knew." He looked down at his hands. "But she just slipped," Elaine whispered. "Where is she?" Kane's voice broke. "I buried her. Near the ridge. Under a pine with a crooked trunk. She drew it once. Said it was the only tree that didn't feel scary." Elaine stood slowly. "Show me." They hiked in silence. The trail was narrow, overgrown with years of moss and bramble. Elaine followed Kane's every step like a shadow, her breath shallow, her heart thrumming like a distant drumbeat. The others stayed behind, giving her space. After 30 minutes, they stopped. A small clearing opened beneath the canopy of crooked pines. One stood taller than the others, bent at the middle, its trunk twisted as if frozen mid-turn. Kane approached and knelt beside a mossy rise in the ground. He placed his hand there, gently. "She's here." Elaine stepped forward. The forest held its breath. She dropped to her knees, touched the earth. "Why didn't you come to me?" Kane's eyes welled with tears. "I wanted to, but I didn't think you'd believe me." I was a ghost by then. No one trusted me. Elaine stared at the soil. She was mine, and she died alone. No, Kane said softly. She died knowing she wasn't being hunted anymore. She died in peace. Elaine broke. The sobs came heavy and raw, her body folding over the ground that held her daughter's remains. The others stayed back, silent, witnessing something sacred. Then Theo stepped forward. "Sheriff," he said quietly. "Something's wrong." Colburn turned to him. "What is it?" He pointed to the trail behind them. "We've been followed." She looked back. Nothing. But the woods felt different. Wrong, like something unseen had stepped just out of view. Colburn whispered, "Get her out of here." Theo nodded and moved toward Elaine. But she didn't stand. She was tracing something carved into the base of the twisted pine. Letters, faint, old, K.M. Free. No more night, Elaine whispered. She wrote this, and behind her, deep in the trees, something moved. The movement came again, a subtle crackle of underbrush, no more than 30 feet beyond the tree line. Theo froze, his hand slid, instinctively toward the holstered sidearm at his belt, eyes scanning the dense thicket. Sheriff Colburn drew hers slowly, her voice a low whisper. "We're not alone." Elaine didn't move. She was still crouched by the grave, fingers trembling against the bark where her daughter had left her final words. She hadn't heard the sound. Or maybe she had, and chose not to react because fear couldn't touch her anymore. Not after this. Theo motioned to Colburn. Could be an animal. But he didn't believe that, neither did she. The silence that followed was too deliberate, too aware. Kane, who had been kneeling nearby, stood slowly. His face paled. "He's still out there," he muttered. "I always thought, after all these years." Elaine turned to him. "What are you talking about?" Kane looked toward the trees. "I used to feel watched, even long after she passed. Sometimes I'd find footprints outside my cabin. Small things missing, just enough to unsettle me. I thought it was my guilt." Theo's eyes narrowed. "You never told anyone?" Who would have listened? Colburn stepped forward. "We're heading back, now." But Elaine didn't move. She looked at the earth, then at the shadows gathering between the trees. "And," she whispered, "I want to see him." Theo's voice dropped. "Elaine, I want to know who he is, why he hunted her, why he didn't stop." And as if her words had summoned him, a figure emerged from the woods. Slow, cautious, not hiding, not anymore. He was older, mid-60s perhaps, with a long dark coat and a thick beard. His face was sunburned, lean. A canvas satchel hung from his shoulder. He raised his hands slowly, palms open. "No weapons," he said, voice low. "No threats." Colburn trained her weapon on him. "Stay right there." He nodded. "I will. Just don't shoot. I don't want trouble." Theo circled behind him carefully. "Who are you?" The man looked at Elaine, then at Kane. "I think you already know." Kane's eyes went wide. "No." Elaine stepped forward, her voice barely audible. "Are you the one she was afraid of?" The man didn't answer. But he didn't deny it. Theo stepped closer, voice firm. "Name." The man exhaled. "Gareth Maddox. I used to work security detail at the camp. One summer. Just one." Elaine's knees locked. "Security? You were never mentioned." "Because I was off the books," he replied. "Hired by a parent. Wealthy, overprotective. Didn't trust the camp's staff. Paid me in cash to keep. An eye on his daughter." Colburn lowered her gun slightly. "What does this have to do with Katie?" "I was there the night she disappeared." Elaine's heart slammed. Maddox continued. "I saw her, just after sunset. She ran past the lake trail, alone, frantic. I followed, but she was fast, and I wasn't the only one who saw her. Theo stepped in. "You're saying someone else chased her?" Maddox nodded. "A man. I never saw his face, but I saw his boots. Military issue. He came from the opposite ridge. No flashlight. Moved like he belonged in those woods." Elaine gripped the bark of the tree. "Why didn't you report any of this?" Maddox's face twisted. "Because the man who hired me told me to disappear. Said if anything came out I'd be blamed. And I believed him." Colburn narrowed her eyes. "Who was he?" Maddox hesitated. Then, quietly, "Gideon Mercer." Elaine froze. That name was burned into her memory. Gideon Mercer, father of one of the other Girl Scouts, a wealthy businessman from Portland. His daughter, Lauren, had always been odd. Elaine remembered how the camp counselors used to give her special treatment, how she never joined the hikes, how she always carried a walkie-talkie. Elaine whispered, "Are you saying Mercer's daughter was involved?" "No," Maddox said. "I'm saying he was." Colburn frowned. "You think Gideon Mercer was in the woods?" "I don't think," Maddox replied. "I know, I saw him." Theo's voice rose. "That man was never on any suspect list. He left Oregon months after the disappearance and took his daughter with him," Maddox said. "He pulled her out of school, disappeared from public life, but I always believed he was hiding something." Elaine stepped closer. "What was he doing in the forest?" Maddox's expression darkened. "That's what I never figured out. But the way he moved, the way Katie looked over her shoulder that night, it wasn't random. She knew him. She was running from him." The wind shifted through the trees, cold and sharp. Elaine closed her eyes. The puzzle pieces were no longer scattered. They were starting to form an image. Kane kept her hidden. Maddox saw her run. And Gideon Mercer might have been the shadow she feared most. Colburn holstered her weapon. "We reopen everything. Property records, witness lists. We find out where Mercer is now." Elaine whispered, "And his daughter." Because if Katie had been afraid of the father, someone else had been watching, and maybe someone else had helped. The Portland address listed for Gideon Mercer hadn't been active in over a decade. The house was long sold. The company he once chaired had dissolved. Public records showed no current employment, no tax returns. He had vanished, deliberately. But Sheriff Colburn wasn't ready to stop. By the next morning, she had launched a coordinated request through state and federal databases. Theo contacted a retired U.S. Marshal with ties to Mercer's old network. And Elaine, sleepless once again, dove headfirst into Lauren Mercer's online footprint. She expected to find nothing. Instead, she found too much. Lauren, now Lauren K., had rebranded herself as a therapist in Northern California. Trauma specialist. Children only. Her website was minimalist and serene, with pastel colors and stock images of forests. Elaine stared at the screen for a long time. Then she picked up the phone. 2 days later, Sheriff Colburn and Elaine were on a plane to Mendocino County. Theo stayed behind to coordinate field teams. Kane was under protective custody, and Maddox had agreed to submit a full affidavit, but refused to travel, citing fear. "He watches from the trees," he said cryptically. "But the roots go deeper." Elaine tried not to think about what that meant. They landed mid-morning and drove inland. The therapy center sat on the edge of a redwood grove, modern and clean. The air smelled of eucalyptus and sea salt. A wooden sign near the door read, "Wholeness Path, Child Recovery Through Nature." Colburn adjusted her badge at her waist. "You ready for this?" Elaine didn't answer. They entered. The receptionist, a young man with nervous eyes, welcomed them politely, but faltered when he saw Colburn's badge. "I'm afraid Dr. K is in a session." "She'll want to pause it," Colburn said. The man made a call. Moments later, a door opened down the hall. Lauren Mercer stepped into view. Elaine's breath caught. She recognized her instantly. The same piercing gray eyes. The same carefully tamed blonde curls. But she was different now. Older, thinner, with a stillness that felt studied. "Can I help you?" she asked, eyes shifting between them. Elaine stepped forward. "You remember Camp Pineheart?" Lauren's expression didn't change, but a flicker passed through her gaze. Recognition. Not surprise. "I do," she said. "Though it's been a very long time." Elaine didn't blink. "You were there the night my daughter disappeared." Another pause. Then Lauren nodded. "I remember Katie," she said softly. "She was sweet. Quiet. Always sketching." Elaine's voice hardened. "Did you see her run?" Lauren hesitated. "No," she said. "I was in my cabin. I didn't know she was gone until morning." Colburn stepped in. "We have reason to believe your father was present in the forest that night, possibly pursuing her." Lauren's face went pale. "I don't know anything about that," she said quickly. "My father, he was protective, maybe overly so, but he wasn't." Elaine interrupted. "He hired Maddox to watch you. Maddox saw him chasing her. He saw Katie run." Lauren backed away a step. "You don't understand." Elaine followed. "Then help me understand. Because for 15 years, I thought my daughter vanished without a trace. And now I know someone chased her, hunted her, hid her, and I need to know why." Lauren's hands trembled. Colburn leaned in. "Where is your father now?" Lauren looked at them both. Then quietly, "I haven't spoken to him in 10 years. "Where is he?" Elaine pressed. Lauren exhaled. "He bought a property in southern Utah, near Kanab, off-grid. I never went. He said it was his retreat, his sanctuary. I think he didn't want to be found." Elaine's eyes burned. "Why was Katie running? From him, Lauren. And now—" Lauren finally broke. Tears welled, her voice cracked. "Because he was obsessed." Elaine's stomach turned. "With Katie?" Colburn asked. Lauren nodded. "He used to talk about her, after camp, said she was special, that she reminded him of someone from his childhood. He became fixated. He talked about saving her, about protecting her from the world." Elaine's hands balled into fists. "He said the world would hurt her, that he needed to take her somewhere safe. I didn't think he meant literally. I thought it was his way of escaping guilt over his own life." Colburn's voice darkened. "Did he ever hurt you?" Lauren looked down. "Yes," she whispered. Elaine couldn't speak. Her fury and pain pulsed like fire under her skin. Colburn stepped back. "You'll need to provide a full statement. We're issuing a federal warrant. We'll find him." Lauren looked up. "Please," she said. "If you do, don't let him talk his way out. He's brilliant, manipulative. He'll spin a story that makes you question everything." Elaine's voice was ice. "Not this time. Back in Oregon, Theo had more news. We found the burial site," he told Elaine over the phone. "The remains match Katie's dental records, but there's something else." Elaine clutched the receiver. "What?" There were 2 sets of footprints. One small, hers. The other, male, heavy, deep tread. And? They led away from the grave. South. Elaine closed her eyes. Her daughter had died in the arms of someone trying to help her. But someone else had been there, watching, tracking, and walking away once it was done. The red rock canyons of southern Utah stretched for miles under a blistering sky. Jagged cliffs rose like cathedral walls, casting long, fractured shadows over the dusty trails. Sheriff Colburn drove in silence, her jaw tight, eyes locked on the winding dirt road ahead. Elaine sat beside her, clutching a folder of evidence. Katie's sketchbook, the journal, the photos from the grave. Theo was in the back seat, studying satellite images of the property they were heading toward. "He's there," he said. "Drone recon confirms movement. Single figure. Hasn't left in days." Elaine didn't speak. Her thoughts were elsewhere. The moment her daughter died. The days she spent hiding. The name she whispered to herself in fear. Gideon Mercer. And now, after all these years, she was about to face the man who had haunted Katie's last summer, and maybe destroyed more than one life. They reached the property line by noon. A rusted metal gate blocked the road. Beyond it, a path wound toward a small house built into the rock, a bunker more than a home. Isolated, sun-bleached, silent. Colburn signaled the others. Guns holstered, emotions restrained, but ready. They approached slowly. At the door, Theo knocked. A pause. Then a voice. "Go away." Colburn stepped forward. "Gideon Mercer, this is Sheriff Dana Colburn of Murrow County, Oregon. We're here to speak with you about a 15-year-old missing persons case." Silence. Elaine stepped beside her. "About Katie Murrow," she said, voice sharp as a blade. "That did it." The door creaked open. And there he was. Gideon Mercer, older, gaunt, his once pristine appearance now buried beneath beard stubble and sweat-stained clothes. His eyes, still piercing, still calculated, fixed immediately on Elaine. "You're her mother," he said, almost admiringly. "I always wondered if you'd find me." Elaine didn't blink. "Then you know why we're here." Mercer stepped aside, motioning them in. "Might as well come in. No point running." The air inside the bunker was stale, thick with dust and the scent of old books. Shelves lined the walls, filled with journals, cassettes, survival gear. A single cot. A table covered in sketches. Some crude, some meticulous. Elaine's stomach turned. They were of Katie. Different angles, expressions, movements, drawn from memory or observation. "You watched her," Elaine said. "You followed her." Mercer sat slowly. "She was extraordinary. You know that, don't you? She saw things most kids never even notice. The way she moved. The way she listened. You terrified her." His gaze remained calm. "I protected her." "No," Elaine snapped. "You chased her into the woods. You forced her to hide. You left her to die alone." Mercer's eyes darkened. "I didn't kill her. I never laid a hand on her. I only wanted to take her someplace safe. The world doesn't deserve children like that." Colburn stepped in. "You were seen. Maddox saw you. Lauren remembers. You lied to everyone." Mercer leaned back. She was slipping away already. Long before the fever. The forest took her in. I thought if I could reach her again, I could keep her. Elaine's hands trembled. "You weren't trying to help. You were trying to possess her." He smiled faintly. "Is there a difference? Any more?" Theo moved behind him, snapping cuffs onto Mercer's wrists. The man didn't resist. He only looked at Elaine. "She called for you," he said softly. "Even when she was dying. She said your name over and over." Elaine's breath caught. "I couldn't stop her from leaving," Mercer whispered. "But she didn't die afraid. I promise you that." Colburn pulled him to his feet. "You'll have plenty of time to explain that in court." As they led him outside, Elaine turned one last time, toward the table. And there, half buried beneath, Mercer's drawings, was something else. A torn scrap of Katie's original map. Elaine picked it up. On the back, written in her daughter's small, careful hand. "He watches from the trees, but I still remember the stars." Elaine pressed the paper to her chest, and for the first time in 15 years, she wept not from loss, but from release. They flew back to Oregon in silence. Elaine watched the clouds pass beneath the plane, her fingers gently tracing the edge of Katie's map. She hadn't let go of it since Utah. The scrap felt like a living thing, a final whisper from her daughter, not just of fear, but of memory, of resilience. She remembered the stars. It wasn't just poetry. It was survival. Colburn sat beside her, flipping through a new stack of reports. Theo had stayed behind to oversee the transport of Gideon Mercer into federal custody. The charges were still being formalized: obstruction of justice, unlawful surveillance of a minor, failure to report a crime. But Elaine knew none of it would ever feel like enough, because the man who chased Katie wasn't behind bars 15 years ago. He was roaming free while she was buried beneath moss and pine. That truth would never change. But now, at least, it had a name. Back in Marrow Creek, the town had begun to stir. The news hadn't gone public yet, but rumors had a way of leaking through cracks, especially in small towns where memory runs deep and silence echoes louder than screams. Elaine stepped into her home with a strange detachment. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. The photographs on the walls, the dishes in the sink, the slight creak in the hallway floorboards, all haunted by the absence of a girl who never got to come home. She placed the map on Katie's old desk, beside it, the sketchbook. Then she sat on the edge of the bed, exhaling a breath she didn't know she'd been holding since 1991. Her daughter had fought to survive. She had evaded predators, trusted strangers, carved messages into wood and earth and metal. She didn't vanish. She resisted. That evening Theo returned. He knocked once, then let himself in. Elaine found him in the living room holding the journal they'd recovered from the woods. "There's something you need to see," he said. He handed her a photocopy, the final, previously unreadable page of the journal, now restored with digital imaging. The ink was faint, but clear. September 2nd, she told me a name, Lauren. Said she was scared of her too, that she followed her once into the lake cave, that she whispered at night. Elaine stared at the page, stunned. "She was scared of Lauren?" she whispered. Theo nodded. "We missed it. Everyone did. While we focused on Mercer, his daughter may have had her own role." Elaine's voice darkened. "You think Lauren lured her into the woods?" "I don't know. But Katie clearly feared her. That lake cave was off limits to campers. We never checked it." Elaine stood slowly. "We're going back." 2 days later, they returned to Camp Pineheart. The buildings were still, faded. The cabins sagged under years of snow and time. The dock had collapsed into the lake. Nature was reclaiming everything. Elaine stood at the tree line, eyes fixed, on the narrow trail that led behind the lodge, toward a jagged outcrop where the water lapped into a hidden cavern. The lake cave. They'd all dismissed it back then, too shallow, too narrow, too dangerous for exploration. But Katie had mentioned it. And now it was time to look. Theo and a local spelunking expert followed Elaine along the crumbling path. The entrance was barely visible, obscured by overgrowth and shadow. They ducked inside. The temperature dropped instantly. The sound of dripping water echoed off limestone walls. The beam of Theo's flashlight swept across wet rock, reflecting glimmers from mineral-rich walls. And then Elaine stopped. There, carved into the stone at eye level, were initials K.M., and below them, L.M. Elaine's stomach turned. "Lauren, Mercer," she whispered. Theo stepped forward. "There's more." He illuminated a narrow alcove, just wide enough to crouch inside. The floor was littered with old wrappers, a rusted flashlight, a bone-dry canteen. Elaine reached down and picked up a fabric strip. Woven pink nylon, a camp bracelet. She recognized the pattern. It was the same type Katie wore that summer. Her hand trembled. "She hid here too," Elaine whispered. "Before the cabin. Before Kane found her. She came here first. Theo studied the alcove. And someone knew. Someone followed. Elaine looked at the initials again. If Lauren had been there, if Katie feared her, then maybe the Mercer legacy ran deeper than just one man. Back in the sheriff's office, Colburn made the decision. We reopen the entire case, she said. This wasn't just one predator. It was a network of silences. Fear. People who chose to look away. Elaine didn't argue. She stood by the window watching the sun break through clouds. Katie had left signs everywhere. And now, they were finally being seen. That night, Elaine sat on her porch. The stars blinked above in a vast, infinite sky. She closed her eyes. She thought of Katie beneath that pine, carving her name, whispering her mother's name, watching stars she would never fully grow into. Elaine whispered to the night, "I remember them too, baby." And for the first time, there was no fear, only the stars. 2 months later, the old trail leading to Cabin 12 was cleared for the first time in years. Volunteers from Murrow Creek came with axes, gloves, and quiet reverence. Elaine stood among them, wearing Katie's ribbon tied around her wrist, watching as overgrowth was pushed back and broken boards were pried loose from the cabin's door. Sheriff Colburn was there too, and Theo, and even Russell Kane, escorted, but not in chains. He had been cleared of wrongdoing, though the guilt still hung on him like a second skin. He had asked to help. Elaine had allowed it, because this was Katie's day, and it belonged to all of them. Inside the cabin was almost exactly as she'd left it, dust thick on the floor, faded messages scratched into wood, the lunchbox long gone to evidence. But the feeling remained, a hush, a presence, a child's breath held in the silence of fear, and the memory of defiance. They worked in careful, silent unison. By midday, a small plaque was placed at the base of the cabin wall, just beneath the window Katie once peeked through to watch for danger. Elaine had written the inscription herself. Katie Murrow, 1981-1991. She fought. She hid. She saw the stars. She was never lost. Kane stood behind her, cap in hand, head bowed. "She taught me more in 3 months," he whispered, "than war or wilderness ever did." Elaine nodded but didn't speak. There was nothing else to say. The town held a vigil that night, not just for Katie, but for every child who'd ever disappeared into silence. They lit candles along the Pineheart Trail, hundreds of tiny flames, lining the forest path like a ribbon of light winding back through time. People came from across the state, former campers, parents, rangers, people who remembered the summer of '91, not just as a tragedy, but as a fracture, a wound that had taken years to name. Elaine walked that trail slowly, alone, her fingers grazing each flicker of flame. Halfway through, she found a note tucked beneath one of the lanterns. It was unsigned, but she knew the handwriting. "Lauren, I was there. I should have said something. She saved me, too. I'm sorry." Elaine folded the note gently and tucked it into her pocket. Forgiveness would come slow, but it would come because guilt, like grief, could not stay buried forever. Weeks later, Gideon Mercer entered a plea deal. It wasn't the headline-grabbing justice Elaine had once fantasized about. There were no cameras, no courtroom drama, no public reckoning. Just a quiet agreement behind closed doors. Guilty of obstruction, unlawful endangerment, and psychological manipulation of a minor. But it was enough. He would never walk free again. And more importantly, the world would know his name, and Katie's. Elaine spent the first snowfall of winter at the ridge. The pine tree with the crooked trunk was now protected under county ordinance. No one could build, cut, or pave anywhere near it. It was sacred ground. She brought fresh wild flowers and the sketchbook. She read to Katie, not out loud, but in her mind. whispered memories of birthdays, bedtime songs, favorite stories, and she promised her daughters something, that she would not be remembered only for her death, but for her strength, her stillness, her stars. 6 months later, a foundation was born, the KM Project, an organization dedicated to re-examining unsolved missing child cases from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, especially those lost in rural, woods, camps, and wilderness areas where systems failed and silence ruled. Elaine didn't run it, but she inspired it. And her story, Katie's story, would become the first in a series of archive investigations used to reopen dormant cases. She gave them permission to share every page, every drawing, every clue. Because Katie had left a map, not just of escape, but of hope. On the anniversary of her daughter's disappearance, Elaine sat once more on her porch. The stars were out. She looked up, not with sorrow, but with something quieter, deeper. Peace. She remembered the line in the journal. She called for you. And now? Elaine could answer. I hear you, sweetheart. She looked up. And I remember too. Then she closed her eyes and let the silence surround her, not as absence, but as presence, not as loss, but as love, always there, just beyond the trees.